and very excited to moderate today's discussion. With me are a few amazing speakers that I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce. First is Stephen Ellinson from AWS. Stephen's Worldwide Head of Restaurants and Food Services at AWS. He has over 30 years helping brands drive exceptional guest experiences, both on the restaurant side as well as the restaurant technology side, where he held various leadership positions prior to joining AWS. So, Stephen, such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Kevin. Grateful to be joining you.
Yeah, of course. Next up is Jason Makita, pre-sales solutions consultant with Amperity. Jason brings about 15 plus years of experience working within marketing technologies, really with a focus on helping some of the world's largest brands provide exceptional guest experiences. Jason, I know we see each other a lot, but it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yep, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
Perfect. And lastly is Niraj Revankar from Taco Bell. At Taco Bell, Niraj is the Director of Enterprise Analytics. He has extensive experience working within data analytics, specifically focusing on helping large organizations build a holistic data strategy, helping them embrace data, make more informed decisions, and power greater customer experiences through the use of it. Niraj, very excited to see you here and get your perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And sorry, guys, I've had technical difficulties. I'm not on video, but I'm there in spirit.
No problem at all. So let's jump into it. I'd like to frame sort of the discussion for today, really why we're here. I don't think it's any secret to any of us here on the call that consumer brands are seeing major shifts in the behavior of their customers. Some of these were occurring pre-pandemic that have really only accelerated as we've gone through it. And so what were once fairly predictable methods for engaging and attracting consumers to these businesses are no longer really driving the desired outcomes that guest-facing teams are hoping to see. And so that leaves B2C businesses like restaurants, retailers, and others scrambling to understand these behaviors and act on the new patterns of these guests. And so customer loyalty within these businesses is no longer a guarantee, especially as these consumer behaviors continue to evolve and iterate upon themselves. And so this is pushing these B2C organizations to rethink what it means to become truly customer-centric and lock in the lifetime value as these customers continue to flow in and out of their businesses and understand audience and segments. At Amperity, we're tackling this challenge head on with our customers. We're leveraging patented technology that we've established to build robust, comprehensive profiles on consumers, all from disparate data points between different systems and different teams that traditionally were unable to communicate with one another, all to ensure that brands that we work with have the flexibility and the agility that they need to run a thriving consumer-centric business. None of this can be accomplished without exceptional partners that we have, of which one of us is here today, which is Stephen at AWS. Again, pleasure to have you. But the end result that we're focused on is brands are embracing this problem, are seeing big returns in their abilities to acquire new audiences, optimize retention strategies, and ultimately drive those truly loyal, desired behaviors that they want to see from their customers. I mentioned with us today is AWS. Stephen, I'd be remiss if I didn't let you add on to this perspective, so maybe you can share what you're thinking about this as well.
Of course. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you so much again for hosting all of us today. To Niraj and Jason, an honor and privilege to be able to join you as well. For some maybe context for my role at AWS, I'm fortunate to cover the entire value stream of the restaurant industry. So what that means is I work with broadline distributors, also pure play technology companies that build like point of sale, labor scheduling, supply chain solutions for the industry. I work with venture capitalists and startups that are investing heavily to try to disrupt our industry. Then I'm also fortunate to work with the actual brands themselves across all possible subsegments. So quick service, fast casual, casual dining, fine dining, and even the contract space. If you think about it, it's very common to have food served into closed areas, such as stadiums, arenas, healthcare, or even higher education type settings. And then I also work with the third-party delivery providers that will pick up that food from the restaurant and deliver it to the end guest. So again, I get to see that raw product come in the back door of the restaurant, and then ultimately the finished product leave and make its way to the consumer or the guest. For that reason, I feel it kind of uniquely positions me to be able to share some of the insights with you and the audience here today. I would share kind of like at the highest, most strategic level when I speak to those C-suite leaders, they use a term called activation. So for them, they're really looking to attract new customers to their business. They want to drive frequency once they get those customers coming to the business. And then they're looking to increase the check spend or how much their guests are spending with them every time they do visit. Kind of universally across that, when I decompose that with them, I see some consistent patterns, and I'd love to share those with you. primarily, brands are desiring really to perform more real-time segmentation. You talked about agility and flexibility of the platform that you guys provide. I mean, that's the key. Gone are the days of when a brand used to have like 4 segments. They would put a customer into one of those 4 segments and they would just live there for eternity, right? Our customers and our segments need to be fluid. The processes and everything must adapt to be able to support that. They also tell me that they want to do hyper-specific targeting. Again, formerly you would put a consumer into like a cohort and you would just market at them towards that cohort. That's now no longer enough. You need to understand the individual consumer, their preferences, their taste preferences, dietary restrictions. You should understand how they've engaged with your brand in the past and really even understand the dining occasion or why they're choosing to dine with you. Kind of now that I shared the what or the why, let me maybe dive into what they tell me, chief marketing officers, chief digital officers, what they're really seeking to accomplish. It always comes down to numbers at the end of the day. So it's about spend optimization, right? They all have budgets, and gone are those days when they could just put forth multi-million-dollar TV contracts and just kind of spray and pray that they were going to hit consumers, right? They have to justify their existence. So they need data and they need metrics, and they really want to optimize their spend and ultimately grow their budgets at the end of the day. To that extent, they want to ensure that they have marketing effectiveness. They seek to do the experiments. If you think about websites and mobile apps, we hear about A/B testing all day long. Well, they want to do the exact same kind of thing with their marketing promotions. How can they rapidly experiment, shut down those that are not successful, or accelerate those that are doing extraordinarily well? And then kind of that last piece I'll introduce, which is what I talked about previously, this concept of dining occasion activation. If you think about it, marketing to me on a Sunday, 60 minutes before a football game, should be very different than the marketing that comes to me, on a work day when I'm in the office, just prior to lunch period. Brands want to be able to do that and activate customers across those particular occasions. And last but not least, there's a lot of distributed decision-making that occurs in these, global or national brands. You need support for the in-market or regional marketing agencies that perform a lot of these activities on behalf of the brands. And so they want a system that enables a single source of the truth, kind of like you described, but also decentralizes that decision-making to allow for and even account for the regional differences of consumers. So really for me at the end of the day, that's why I'm super excited for the conversation today. I really want to hear from Jason how all of this technology is supporting that kind of innovation. And of course, I'm super excited to hear from Niraj how a global brand is actually utilizing it.
Perfect. That's amazing. And yeah, all fantastic topics that looking forward to touching on and getting into more in depth today. I think the biggest thing that comes out to me is the changing consumer expectations, right? And Niraj, I'd love to direct this to you as we get started. I imagine you have a ton of exposure to the radical changes in how consumers are interacting with the brands that you've worked with over the years. Maybe we can start with what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in going back to what Steven mentioned around like data-driven marketing, I have the exciting job of ensuring all the data is in one spot, it's cleaned and used by the marketing team for the activation. So they've got the magic, I've got the math, and between us, I think we've got a great team and I think some exciting results to show for it. So like Taco Bell has a great relationship with our consumer, right? They're extremely consumer focused. I've been in this role at Taco Bell for a couple of years and I was just amazed to see a cult following for Taco Bell. We have a great social purpose as well, right? For folks that saw the Super Bowl, you might have seen like the Taco Bell Live Mass Scholarship winner presenting an award to like the NBA All-Star Skills. I think it was the All-Star Skills Challenge winners. We also had Doja Cat perform this year at the Super Bowl. And it's an example of like how we position our brand and we target to our customers. But the consumer expectations have definitely changed. So a few years ago, we had 2 primary channels, right? We had drive-through, we had dine-in. Along the way, we added 3 new delivery channels, whether it's kiosk, e-commerce, and delivery. And in 2014, we actually were the first quick service brand to offer order ahead technology through our mobile app. But we didn't see a ton of like traction. The users trickled in. We didn't have a lot of customer data. But up until 2019, I think, and this was during COVID, we noticed a significant jump in our digital transactions, in our delivery transactions. Mm-hmm. The growth was pretty exponential. And what we are finding is that this behavior is here to stay. During that time, we also found that, these are our valuable customers. right? We saw a significant uptick both in transactions and higher spend per visit. So leading to an increase in overall spend for our active customers in the Taco Bell Rewards program as we compare it to their pre-loyalty behavior. So just at the macro level, what we're seeing is, look, folks want to use the digital channels. They expect us to, send one-to-one personal marketing. They're accustomed to ordering their food through the digital channels, which is why it's even more critical to have like a simple, frictionless digital presence. And that's the focus and innovation of a lot of what we're going to be doing in the next few years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jason, I was going to say, maybe from a technology standpoint, what have we seen our customers embracing and thinking about in terms of customer behavior?
Yeah, to Niraj's point, what we're seeing is that, on the ground here in the CDP and loyalty space is that brands that have traditionally had a brick and mortar presence are really now having to meet the customers where they're at. So Niraj talked about mobile, web, app. I believe Stephen alluded to delivery aggregators, right? Having to meet them where they're at is super important. Technology is becoming a key enabler of that. Brands are starting to trust SaaS software more with their customer data because you get the rewards like you do with, a large, in the cloud customer data warehouse, that folks like AWS provide. You get scale, right? Number one, you get agility and the ability to integrate, just like limitless integration capabilities when you go to the SaaS model. And so we're seeing a heavy movement from more traditionally on-prem into the SaaS world. And it's allowing the brands to see their customers and leverage their customer data in a much more timely manner than before. Specifically, in the CDP space, we've seen CDP adoption really enable three things for these brands. Number one is really leveraging or embracing the concept of first-party data and loyalty data, which wasn't such a thing especially in the QSR space for a long time. There wasn't a focus around, collecting and gathering that first-party data and loyalty program data and building a strong data foundation. So that's number one thing we're seeing. Number two, we're seeing the ability for them to create accurate customer views leveraging a CDP to truly understand the customer journey and where the customer is at with them. And lastly, by leveraging a CDP or technology to build a first-party data set, it's increasing the ability to go get second and third-party data, right? And you learn even more about your customers. So the adoption of technology is allowing a lot of this data to come together across loyalty and across all the interaction points with your customers and really drive the next level loyalty programs for those who are starting to really get into loyalty programs and figure out loyalty acquisition options.
Totally. No, I think you bring up a great point. I mean, especially as you think about consumer behavior now, these loyalty programs themselves, they need to adjust as well, right? If you think about the history of loyalty programs, and Steve, I think you alluded to it earlier, it started as a one-size-fits-all, right? It was the same rewards, it was the same messaging, no matter if you were, dining or staying in the hotel frequently or very infrequently throughout the course of the year. But as customers become more tenured in these programs and they start to join more of these programs, as well as some of the third-party things that they're experiencing, right? Like third-party delivery, they're experiencing convenience, they're experiencing ease of use. Now, all of a sudden, these customers have higher expectations, right? They crave personalization. They crave to be known and understood by those brands that they interact with. And doing that, to your point, requires expanding the scope of your knowledge and data usage beyond just the loyalty programs that are in place and really embracing all the first-party data that is coming into your business. So, Niraj, I know I continue to go back to you here, but I'm curious if that resonates at all with you in your experience with Taco Bell. Maybe you could share how you're thinking of innovating loyalty and guest engagement today at the brand. You might be on mute.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've had industry-specific trends around changing consumer behavior. We've had a lot of data flowing in, customer data flowing in. And we knew our loyalty customers had a high customer average value and were highly engaged. So our focus was more on customer acquisition, being able to address our known customer base through a one-to-one personalization, and as well as being able to address unknown customers through our paid channels. And then there was the future of cookieless world, which made it even more important to focus on the first-party data, like you mentioned. So I think just in terms of like even with loyalty, we looked at it from an innovation and focus standpoint. We said, hey, look, we really need to get good at owned comms, right? Our personalized push messages, offers in our email, text, apps, and social media. And then the loyalty programs are part of our personalized pull message offers, right, in our own platforms such as web, app order, et cetera. So we looked at it holistically. I think, like you said, loyalty has changed, over the years, and as we're starting to think about like, hey, look, we want to be able to acquire the customers, we want to be able to then, provide them certain rewards, but then we also want them to come back to the restaurant. So you probably have seen like we've got the TLP subscription. So that's one of the key trends that we're seeing where there's a lot of excitement and buzz around that. And so a lot of what we want to do is be able to get that personalized, like the data for our customers to be able to give them, hey, whether it's digital only menu products. You wouldn't think of that, a few years ago in the QSR industry, right? So those are some of the things that we are seeing, and some of the, I think from a future standpoint, a lot of it is, again, getting the data, making sure we understand it so that we can tailor our loyalty programs with the messages that we're getting back from the customer.
Perfect. Stephen, I don't know if you're thinking about it from a broader perspective, across industries, what you're seeing.
I would say I would mirror a lot of what Niraj described. Maybe for some of our participants who have joined us, they may not know we're moving to a cookieless society, and we're not talking about foods and we're not talking about desserts. Apple altered the iOS tracking policies. Maybe if you have an iPhone, you've seen now every time you open an app, it asks you, do you want to allow it to track you across the entire system? And Google and Chrome have announced that they're going to be fastly following this. So that's why it's so important to folks like Niraj and others in the industry. Another key piece, I'll kind of bounce back to where we talked about dining occasions. I've seen reports that show that the average household has 10 devices. So you might even reflect upon yourself with, tablets and phones and smart speakers and smart televisions and the like. And so that's really causing a fragmentation in the data for practitioners like Niraj and others, right? As a brand, you want to know who's placing the order, what device they're placing it from, and what the dining occasion is that they're seeking. And so like being able to break through that fragmentation is ever more important. I think one of the best ways that I'm able to help brands kind of face all that is the fact that I can learn from being inside of Amazon. Hopefully some of you guys are Amazon.com users and have experienced some of how Amazon itself tries to help break that down. Perhaps you've been reminded by your Alexa device that it's time to reorder dog food because we understand like that context. Maybe you've gone online to try to purchase something like a kayak because you wanted to have, a day on the lake with your family. Well, you would have seen that Amazon's smart enough to not just let you buy the kayak, it's going to suggest you also get paddles and the life preserver because it understands your intent is not just to get a kayak, but is to go have a fun day, right, with your family. Or if you use Prime Video or listen to music, you've likely seen the curation of a next best title for you, right? We start to learn what are the kinds of genres and things that you like, and we try to continue to present those on your behalf. The only way we're able to do that is through some of the concepts that Jason described, things like identity resolution, understanding an individual consumer's preferences, interpreting those events and those occasions. That's really how we drive that one-on-one personalization. So I think Niraj described it. Customer expectations are going to continue to change, and I think we're going to see the restaurant brands continue to evolve.
Yeah, and I want to jump in with a couple quick thoughts here. When we're talking about ending this like third-party cookie world, which I loved your joke with the food there, by the way, and we talk about first-party data and loyalty data, I want to bring up one or two additional points, and that is the idea of zero-party data. For those who don't know what zero-party data is, first-party data would be something like signing up for your loyalty program or signing up for emails, but zero-party data is even more valuable, and that is like customer satisfaction surveys or things where your customers willingly give you additional data about themselves outside of maybe just traditional PII during a sign-up. And Stephen, you talked a little bit about Amazon, right? Trying to leverage as much data as possible. The more data you get, including that zero-party data in combination with your first-party data, is what's going to help you build that foundation to understand where that individual customer is, right, within that journey with you and with your brand. And then you mentioned identity resolution, Stephen. If you throw that on top of, if you take all that zero-party data, you take all that first-party data, and you truly do a great job of identity resolution, you'll see massive changes in your ROI and your customer experience that you're able to serve. So just bringing up an example that I've seen here at Imperity, we worked with a leading lifestyle brand, and they didn't have an identity layer. They were collecting a bunch of this data, but they weren't kind of deduping it and really understanding their customer. And they had an annual churn prevention campaign that they were running constantly. And after they ran identity resolution and properly deduped the customer data and actually understood who all the actual customer records were combined together so they could build like a true picture of that person, of each individual. After running that process, the next year they saw a 3 times increase in their churn prevention. And that was because they were now able to truly understand who was churning, and they weren't seeing 3 records where maybe one of those 3 looked like it was churning, but the person was not actually churning when you combine the other records. So gathering this data and leveraging this data is going to be huge as we end reliance on third-party data acquisition.
Yeah, I think I think one thing I've seen, especially working with so many brands, is just the sheer amount of options that businesses have as it comes to like leveraging technology around this. Right, we're talking about a picture where there's so much data to ingest in order to understand and know and interact with your customers. And whether you're using a CDP or not, you're facing an influx of decisions around optimizing for the customer, right? And so, Stephen, I might put it back to you. Curious what trends you're seeing around that, right? The brands you work with are making these decisions. Is there an approach that you typically suggest when evaluating and selecting and actually implementing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. I would say universally, restaurant brands tell me they want to leverage the massive amount of data they've collected. If you think about all those things Jason just described, right, they've accumulated it. Now, how can they transform their business with it? And so they tell me they want tools and process and partners and systems that help them to easily store all this, process all of it, and analyze all of it so they can get insights. Because at the end of the day, it's of no value, right, unless we derive a business insight that we can inform a decision with. To do it, of course, it's a restaurant brand. They need it to be safe, secure. They need it to be very cost effective. And of course, they want it to be able to scale because their business is expected to grow. We've thrown a lot of 3-letter acronyms out, CDPs, MDMs, CRMs, all these other kinds of things. I would share from being fortunate to observe customers implement these kinds of solutions over the years that no single one of those solutions is going to be a cure-all for anything. So what we really guide people to realize is that this is not a project where you're just going to implement a tool and it has a defined beginning and an end date, but this is really much more around a program mindset, right? You're taking this program that's going to live on forever about how can you deepen your engagement with your customers. And so you must plan to care and feed for it, right, for the foreseeable future. So to that extent, it's critical that you select tools and partners and processes that really support ultimately the business decision and path where you're going along. And so again, we'll get a little bit technical, but we advise folks to make sure first and foremost that you own all of your data, right? So if a provider is going to let you use a system, but somehow the data is locked into it and it's their data, right? We would advise you to use caution because they're your customers. It should be your data. And then ensure that any system you engage with has a application programming interface or an API. What that really means is that it's open because the odds are you're going to probably select a few best of breed applications to help you do different things. Identity resolution, campaign management, marketing automation, right? And you want to make sure that you can easily and rapidly connect all the systems together that ultimately give you the capabilities that your business needs for today and also for the future.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we know that flexibility is such an important thing as you're making technology decisions. Speaking of, Niraj, I know that you've been making numerous technology decisions over the years, on the Taco Bell side, or just in your experience. I'd love to hear how you've approached them, how you're thinking about a tech roadmap within your organization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as we tech folks love to implement a shiny object, we absolutely need to look at the business benefits, right, and the prioritization there. So we've been investing in like MarTech over the years. We had some capabilities in this space, but just the increase in our first-party data and consumer behavior really helped us define the vision, right, and its impact to the overall business. So it was a collaborative effort between like tech, marketing, and ops. And we said, hey, where do we want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Just building blocks. What is missing? What do we need to build? And we prioritized, right? So we approached the tech roadmap in a holistic manner. Steven mentioned, hey, look, we need, it's not just about data, right? There's data systems, there's MarTech systems. Jason alluded to the fact that you need to get zero-party data. So we looked at it in a holistic manner. We looked at our transactional systems. We looked at our loyalty systems. We looked at our marketing automation platforms, our data warehouse, our data platforms for data science. And we were very intentional. So while we built that blueprint of what it needs to look like, we were very intentional in being agile and picking up the use cases to demonstrate the value earlier on. So we took some of those broad themes that the marketing team was looking at, and we knew that in the cookieless future, first-party data was key. So we started early, build the foundation, made sure we would collect the data fast, ingest that at scale, and really work with our enterprise architecture teams to make sure that the MarTech systems that we're investing in can provide the data that can be linked back. So we had an ID strategy earlier on, and it was a version 1 of the strategy just to make sure that we can collect the data from our Google Analytics, from our marketing automation platform, et cetera. And I think so we kind of grew what we call a lake house, and we had an external CDP in mind, but we said, hey, look, let's develop version 1. Let's hydrate our activation platform. Let's see the value. And when we started to see the value, obviously we wanted to accelerate. And I think that's when we started to look at external CDP to say, hey, look, what's our big bet? Is it identity management? Is it customer journey mapping? Is it activation? Is it all of those things? And that's when we started to say, hey, look, now we're in a position where we use what we call a classic crawl, walk, run approach, where we could do stuff. We can make incremental impact to the business. But now we've got a good enough, like a team, we've got use cases to then start to really start to run. And we're at a stage where we can run today. So that's essentially how we kind of looked at it, building blocks to get to an initial stage, show the incremental value, and then move on from it. And the other consideration as a enterprise analytics person I have is I'm not looking at just the customer data, but I'm also looking at our restaurant data, supply chain data, and how I can connect those dots to really build a connected data platform. So it's a build with strategy. There's, Steven mentioned, there's like different components. If we want to support the future state innovation and start building values, and we want to be able to then grow our relationship vendors that provide that technology benefit stuff that we can't really, or we don't want to build on our own. So that decision on the technology partners and growing that is also a critical piece.
Yeah, Niraj, I love how you talked about, starting with the business problems essentially too, right? Even though you're talking about, how to pick the right technologies. And I think that is important because you also get rewards for taking that approach, right? So by solving on the business or, focusing on solving the business problems rather than just delivering a technical solution, right? So you started with your data and then you started to say, okay, what can we do? What can we solve with this data? Your approach was a perfect example of building that data foundation. But one of the benefits, of solving, business problems or selecting technology to specifically solve business problems is it starts to free up your technical teams, your IT teams like Niraj's team, to not worry about, basic data integration or collecting the data anymore and actually start to impact the business and drive ROI. So IT becomes even a more important player within the business by leveraging the technology that's available and picking the right technology partners to work with to help you solve these business problems while providing a technology solution, if you will.
Yeah, I would add, I think it's brilliant. And I want to call attention to it. Some might missed it. It was subtle in Niraj's piece. Taco Bell recently introduced the Taco Lovers Pass. So if you don't know, for a low rate, you can get yourself one single taco a day, every day, as part of that subscription. And so you think about it, we've seen this from other industries adjacent, right? So commonly the airlines, the hotels, they've been doing these kinds of activities for 30 years. It's only now that the restaurant industry is getting into it. So we have a lot that we can learn from them. They've really leveraged their first party properties, right, to get the kind of zero party or first party data that Jason's been describing. Think about yourself, right? Like you'll go to an airline's website because you always get the guaranteed lowest rate, or you book direct with a hotel brand because you know you have the most flexible cancellation policies. And so those kinds of things like creating subscription taco passes and others are going to be the really innovative things that the restaurant industry is going to do to continue to drive consumers to engage with them directly.
Totally. Jason, on your side, I think, thinking business transformation. I know that we work with a lot of big brands. Any examples that come to mind?
Yeah. So, Steven talked about being able to focus on, the loyalty programs and great ideas. And so when we work with our customers, by basically providing them a data platform that they can trust and being a trusted partner, we see that they're able to focus on business problems, right, instead of data problems. So, a Fortune 500 retailer that comes to mind that we worked with recently, they essentially lowered their data management cost by like 30% and got back like 20% of their IT team's time. And what they did with that is they actually moved the IT resources, more into the analytics side and started performing loyalty program analytics and customer analytics, and started to go back to the business and actually coming up with new ideas, like you talked about the taco program as an example, but simply having the IT team's time available because they selected the right technology to focus on actually looking at the business problems, they were able to come up with all sorts of good ideas for the loyalty program. So we're absolutely seeing this today with our customers.
Yeah, and I think, Stephen, going back to your point, like the airlines and the hotels are way ahead, right? They figured out that locking in lifetime value is the appropriate way to engage consumers. And so that's why there's such an attachment to, the Marriott app, the Southwest app, because of those engagements. And I think restaurants are still starting to feel that pressure from, the third-party marketplaces and realizing that lifetime value is important. And it requires, again, to look outside just the loyalty data that they have. I think another aspect, if we want to turn outside of sort of technology and what it serves with guest engagement and loyalty, is the organizational commitment that's necessary for implementing new kind of customer-focused strategies. It's embracing first-party data is not a one human responsibility. And so, Jason, I want to turn it back to you again. I know that we meet with prospective buyers all the time. Where have you seen organizations really get it right as it relates to their strategy with first-party data and other concepts related to activating consumers?
Yeah, we see organizations that have already started that organizational transformation or that thought process change. And then there's a lot that come to us and say, well, how do you think about this? Or how do we organize internally to prepare for this change of, collecting first party data and thinking about first party data? And we always come back to, you need to align your business and your technical teams, right? They need to come together in the decision-making process. And you need to start to build those cohorts within the organization, because what we see is if one group, like let's say it's just marketing or just IT, is really thinking about this problem or what technology will help solve it, you're not delivering for the full audience of the business. So what we recommend is that the business and the technology stakeholders start that process of having the ability to meet regularly. And then we promote creating a list of prioritized use cases that drive the highest ROI. And it doesn't mean the highest ROI for just the business, but also IT, right? Where IT gets the biggest wins and the business gets the biggest wins. Prioritizing, the highest ones, and then don't boil the ocean. Start with take those top prioritized use cases and almost break those into layers, and start with the absolute vital few, if you will, prioritize use cases, and then iterate on top of that, because you're not going to be able to get everybody in lockstep right out the gate and find a piece of technology, let's say, to solve all these problems right out the gate, which Stephen was talking about earlier, right? Like no one piece of technology is the magic that does all of this. So getting your business and IT teams fully aligned here and prioritizing those use cases, I think are the two things to think about right out the gate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it definitely changes the day-to-day of a lot of different departments as they, really embrace that first-party strategy. And I think there's equal levels of trust and commitment that are required at the table in order to do so. Stephen, probably at the more strategic executive level, I know you have access there. What organizational mechanics are you seeing on this topic?
Yeah, first and foremost, Kevin, thank you for surfacing what I would argue is probably the most important question we'll describe. Because if you follow like Peter Drucker, who's a very well-known management leader and consultant, he famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So you could have the best strategy in the world, but if you can't align your team members and your resources, zero chance at execution. So brilliant question. I think Jason did a great job kind of walking through it. My ad might be I'm also fortunate to be able to learn from my leaders. So while I support the value stream of the restaurant industry, right, I have leaders like Andy Jassy, who's the former CEO of AWS and now the CEO of all of Amazon, who does the same exact thing. So he speaks with all the C-suite leaders of just like Fortune 500 companies. I think there's some common patterns I would add to what Jason had shared. And it's that first and foremost, you got to get that senior leadership team aligned, right? And they have to have a super strong conviction. This can't just be the chief marketing officer's desire to become more data-driven and engage customers. Like they have to get into the boardroom, hash it out, and walk away being like totally aligned on what it is they want to accomplish. One of the things they should also walk away with is aggressive top-down goals, right? If it doesn't come from the top, there's no chance of aligning the rest of the organization around that rallying cry. And so you hear a lot of this term, moonshot and those kinds of things nowadays, but it's true. Set that super aggressive goal, right? Even if you don't get to the moon, you'll still hit the stars kinds of things. So you're going to help your organization and you're going to deepen your engagement with your customers. And then I think really the last piece I would add to what Jason described is train your people, right? People that have been in your organization for even the last 2 years or maybe the last 30 years, they weren't natively born with these skills. We weren't always data-driven organizations. We didn't always have the technology and the business processes to do what we're doing. And so invest in them. You can find partners and providers and others that will help you to really upskill and continue to develop the talent in your organization. I'm really curious, though, actually, Niraj, who's implemented this in a global brand, might you be able to share some of your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, both you and Jason have hit the nail on the head. I think there's a top-down goal that is absolutely important, right? So we did some analysis. We saw like, look, this is growing. But the organizationally, they had a bold goal. And what we had to do is obviously look at what the building blocks were, right? And in terms of like prioritization of what the use cases are, we had cross-functional collaboration. We identified the top use cases. We kind of showed the value and then expanded. And the organizational buy-in was not just from the marketing side, it was also the ops side of things, right? So as we start to think about building a calendar to be able to bring in more revenue from our digital channels, the ops and the restaurants need to execute. So it was also important to make sure that they were on board on some of the changes that we were making. Because it wasn't just drive-through or dine-in anymore, right? You had digital products, you had subscription-based that would change the frequency, and you had some certain products that were offered only through digital channels. So as we kind of set to put that together, it was important to say, hey, look, what use cases are going to impact us the most? And essentially, I think we've got those quick wins. We got the buy-in last year based on the work that we did. And then we said, hey, look, we need to now be more agile and continue to go down that path and focus on those top-down goals. So yeah, I 100% agree. And that path really has served us well. I think what I enjoy the most is, yes, working with that data, measuring those impact, those initial incremental use cases that we implemented, and then be able to say, hey, look, this is what it's going to look like, right? And what that does is also like help with the future roadmap, saying, okay, well, if our active customers and our loyalty customers are really our valuable customers that are highly engaging, then how do we look at our other addressable customers that are really not, that we can talk to from a paid media perspective, but that we need to start to bring in and acquire them. So it helps with the holistic strategy on how we kind of address our known customers, our addressable customers, and some of the unknown customers that are out there.
Yeah, great perspective, Niraj. And just thank you all. Like, this has been such an energizing discussion. So I think it's been a productive discussion so far with the time we've had. I know that I want to leave space for Q&A, but I think, one closing question, right? I think, Stephen, you mentioned at the beginning, what we're seeing as a result of some trends that accelerated during the pandemic is only the starting point, right? They're not going away. We're not going to go back to normal. And so I'm curious, the question is, what do you see as the future state of loyalty and guest engagement in your respective roles, right? We're coming at this from different lenses, and I'm curious what each one of you are thinking about. Maybe I'll pass to Niraj. Why don't we go with you in terms of what you're seeing on the ground at Taco Bell?
So yes, I think like I mentioned earlier, we launched the Taco Pass, right? And that's something that we wouldn't have thought about a few years ago. So it's available exclusive through the Taco Bell app, and it allows fans to redeem one of the iconic tacos, right, for 30 consecutive days. So we are seeing a lot of traction there. There's a lot of buzz out there. And I think just in terms of engagement, right, with our customers, one-to-one marketing, that's something that we are seeing as well. We're going back to the zero-party data. We are collecting a lot of the voice of the customer data as well, to be able to help us with the future state. And there's also looking at some of the macro, what's happening in the space, whether it's NFTs or metaverse and some of the other things that are happening. How do we tie that in? So that's still up for discussion. We're still working on a roadmap, but I think being going back to the social purpose for Taco Bell, engaging through storytelling and really being that lifestyle brand, I think the focus is going to be on that.
Yeah, I'll speak to what we're seeing. Yeah, in from our lenses, we talk to customers. So first, they realize now the importance of zero party, first party data and building. And as they look to the future, they're saying once we set our base, our good first party base, what are the options out there? And this is an emerging market around second party safe, data sharing clean rooms, or what's the best third party data acquisition strategies, with the third party cookie being gone, but now I've got my good first party data. So people are already starting to think about that next layer, and we're seeing a lot of movement in that industry. And then I think the other thing that we're seeing from customers is if they didn't have a customer analytics team before, specifically folks dedicated to understanding the customer data, they're starting to hire people to do that and build out entire customer analytics teams to just think about customer data and how to use customer data to drive business decisions. So I think that's kind of the future state. We're going to see an increase in customer analytics. We're going to see an increase in second and third party data options once you've got your first party data accurately set. So that would be my thought of where I see the next few years going.
Yeah, and I'll join in and try to be succinct so we can give a lot of time to the Q&A portion. I see brands continuing to invest and seeking out, partners and providers that can accelerate and amplify outcomes for them. As we've kind of heard, this could be a very complex and challenging, subject if you've not been a deep practitioner. And so they're looking for folks that have a broad set of capabilities and real life experiences so they can help those brands, more rapidly innovate and make sure they have the capabilities they need both now and again for the future, kind of like we described. And the last thing, because I'm fortunate to have been associated to the restaurant industry for 32 years, is I am absolutely certain that the innovation that was born from the pandemic, right, from my fellow colleagues all around the industry, is going to continue to impact restaurant operations for the foreseeable future. Ultimately, customers have come to truly value convenience, And whichever brand is able to provide it for them is going to have loyal customers forever.
Awesome. Gentlemen, such a fantastic discussion. I know we wanted to leave space for a couple Q&A, and we have a couple coming in, but wanted to say appreciate all your perspectives. Thank you for your time with us. And with that said, let's go ahead and look into the Q&A. And I think coming out is the first one for Jason and Steven. How are external factors like privacy changes putting more emphasis on personalization and first-party data?
Did you want to go first, Steven, or did you want me to?
You want to go first, yeah.
Go ahead. I love. It feels like there's a slightly more technical tinge to it, so I'd love to see how you open it, and then I'll absolutely add on.
Well, it's a huge topic, right? So privacy is changing a lot. It's not one thing, but my immediate thought goes to, with the elimination of third-party data and cookies, and that was from GDPR, CCPA, all these privacy things, coming to fruition, and we don't know where we're going to continue to go in the future. But what we've seen, which is interesting to me, is it's already starting to impact people trying to look for either the concept of a universal ID, right, to replace the cookie, or just other approaches to get data. And we're seeing a ton of movement in the space. So like, for those who pay attention, like Google had Flocks, and it was kind of met with a little bit of resistance. And then they gave up on this idea of Flocks, and now they're going to do topics for trying to allow people to get access to more data. You've got Trade Desk coming up with UID 2.0. There's a lot of movement right now to, like, if you get good first party data, how can you leverage it? And so I guess the privacy changes are definitely impacting this. I guess what I would encourage all of you out there, if you're thinking about these things, is we don't know who's going to win. We don't know what universal IDs are going to, come to fruition. We don't know what that tech stack's going to look like in 5 years from now. So root yourself, this goes back to the key point of this meeting, root yourself in great customer first and zero party data. And then as these things start to happen, you're going to have all the options available to you to start to navigate this privacy, ever-changing privacy landscape. Because no matter what technologies win, if you've got good data to start with, you'll be able to bounce off of whatever solutions are out there that Google may be saying is next, or what Amazon wants to do, or whoever wants to do. And you'll be able to work with all these partners moving forward. So I guess it's a tough one to answer, but that's where my head goes when I start thinking about how privacy is impacting the world right now.
I love it. And I would just add, maybe I'll answer the question with a question. Do you know the difference between spam and activation? And the answer is actually relevancy, right? So if you think about it, it's so subtle. Taco Bell does a great job of it. If you happen to be, vegetarian or such, they have an awesomely curated menu that supports that. And so, like, if you hit me with a message that has, the triple bacon chalupa, and you clearly know I'm a vegetarian, I'm going to view that as spam, right? But you hit me with this, brand new, vegetarian thing they're doing with, spicy beans, and what you've done is activated me. And it's so subtle, the difference between those. So it's really just about getting it right. And then I'll kind of give the last piece of guidance, which is that I always remind people we're in the hospitality industry, right? And so by definition, that means we're supposed to be warm and welcoming. Back in the day, we would actually, bring people into our establishments and welcome them by name and smile and all those things. So the trick is to be cool about it and not to be creepy. And so as long as you're obviously abiding by all the regulations and governance and following those policies, but doing it in a way that's cool for the consumer, you're going to continue to earn their trust, and they're going to continue to want to engage with you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that probably just add to that is consent. I think that's one of the things that we're doing is ensuring we've got the right preferences and the right consent as we kind of start to communicate with them. And we've got like policies and procedures on our end to adhere to like the compliance requests, whether it's DSRs, CCPA, etc. So that I think like getting those right at the bat is absolutely important. And I think there's a whole like a privacy team that looks at it, the archival, the retention of customer data as well.
Perfect. The next one's coming in. I think, Niraj, I'll direct this to you. Going back to that point about just expectations of customers, right? They want to feel known and relevant and understood to your brand. The question is, what can brands do to prepare and maintain trust with their audience as you make these changes to first-party data?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the key pieces. I think just in terms of we know that the customers will return if they trust the brand. So I think from our standpoint, we've got to be able to say, look, we store your customer data, but we've got the policies around it. We've got consent. We've got the preferences. And that's essentially where we're looking at and say, look, we don't want to be sending you notifications and emails that are not relevant to you, going back to Steven's point, right? And we want to be able to engage with you the way you like it. So that, to my mind, is key, and that's something that we're focusing on.
Perfect. I think we may have time for one more, which I think is going to expand the entire panel here. So the one question is, curious how the panel views customer loyalty programs as part of an effective strategy to drive customer lifetime value, but more specifically, how these loyalty programs can increase NPS and improve the price value equation for customers. And Jason, maybe I'll start with you on that one.
Oh, great question. Driving an effective strategy to driving CLV. Loyalty programs are an effective start, right? But I think I alluded to this earlier. Building out customer analytics teams, bringing in experts in this domain, and will allow you to start to effectively look at your customer base to try to drive CLV. I would also say, because I'm representing the technology arm of it here, there's also a lot of predictive capabilities out there, predictive analytics capabilities around trying to predict customer lifetime value based on your customers as they look today and various things like that. So I would say, understanding your true customer lifetime value begins with identity resolution and understanding your customer, and then layering in some of these predictive capabilities that are now available will really allow you to develop strategies to try to drive CLV from your loyalty program.
Sure.
Yeah, I might smallly add, there's a lot of research and a lot of studies out there. So certainly you can go gather data about the average spend or the average increase in frequency, or spend per visit, like those kinds of things. There's a lot of metrics. So the data certainly would prove out the value of a loyalty and reward program. The key, I would say, is where we see brands be perhaps maybe more effective and more efficient than others is when they truly take a customer-centric approach to it, right? Work backwards from what your customers want. What do your customers value? And build the program that delivers for them. Where brands think about, we got to have a reward program, and they launch it because the only thing they care about is frequency or spend, right? You're doing it backwards, right? So really, really, really start from what your customers get a value out of and build your program to deliver that, because then you're going to deepen that engagement and they're going to want to continue to share data with you and frequent your establishment.
Niraj, any parting thoughts as we hit the wall on time?
No, I think that's absolutely. I think both Jason and Steven kind of alluded to it. Look, at the end of the day, we need to be able to be authentic, right? And it's a simple message, but I think that's what resonates with the people as well.
Well, I know we're at time. Alec, I think I'll turn it to you for closing out, but appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. And thanks to Niraj, Steven, and Jason as well for taking the time to be here. We had a lot of questions coming in, everybody. So thanks for your engagement and participation. Today's webinar was recorded. You're going to receive a link to that recording, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. I want to also shout out AWS and Amperity once more for sponsoring today's event. It's been an absolute pleasure working with the team there. So thanks once more to everybody on the line. We'll see you on the next one.